June 21, 1957. Room 839, Hotel Lom, Brooklyn. FBI agent Ed Gamber pressed his ear against the thin wooden door, listening to the sound that would change Cold War espionage forever. Inside the room, a man was painting watercolors of the Brooklyn Bridge, completely unaware that his decade-long masquerade was about to end. This wasn't just any amateur artist enjoying a quiet morning in New York. This was Colonel Rudolph Ivanovich Il, though that wasn't his real name either. The man behind the easel was actually Willem Genriovic Fischer, one of the most sophisticated intelligence operatives the Soviet Union had ever deployed on American soil. For nearly 10 years, this unassuming middle-aged man had lived among ordinary Americans, blending seamlessly into Brooklyn's immigrant community while orchestrating one of the most successful spy networks in Cold War history. He had stolen atomic secrets, military blueprints, and classified intelligence that found its way directly to Moscow. The KGB considered him their crown jewel, their master spy who had proven that deep cover operations could penetrate the heart of American society. But today, that remarkable career was about to meet its end. The hunt for Rudolph Il had consumed the FBI for years, involving hundreds of agents across multiple states and requiring cooperation with the CIA that pushed both agencies to their operational limits. What began as a routine investigation into suspicious financial transactions had evolved into the most complex counterintelligence operation in American history. The man they were pursuing wasn't just another spy passing documents in dark alleys. He was something far more dangerous. He was a ghost who had built an entire American identity from nothing, living openly in Brooklyn while running networks that reached into the most sensitive corners of the United States military and atomic programs. Agent Gamber checked his watch one final time. In exactly 3 minutes, teams positioned throughout the Hotel Lom would move simultaneously, sealing every exit and ensuring that the Soviet Union's greatest spy would have nowhere to run. The operation represented the culmination of investigative work that had stretched across continents, involved defectors risking their lives, and required intelligence-gathering techniques that pushed the boundaries of what American law enforcement had ever attempted. This wasn't just an arrest. This was the capture of a man who had successfully operated under the noses of American intelligence for nearly a decade, stealing secrets that could have altered the balance of the Cold War. But how had it taken so long to find him? How had one man managed to evade the combined efforts of the FBI and CIA while living openly in one of America's largest cities? The answer lies in understanding not just who Rudolph Il was, but how the Soviet intelligence apparatus had evolved to create the perfect deep cover operative. Abel represented something new in espionage, something that Western intelligence agencies were only beginning to comprehend. He wasn't a diplomat with diplomatic immunity or a military attaché operating from an embassy. He was a completely fabricated American citizen with a completely fabricated life story backed by documentation so sophisticated that it had fooled banks, landlords, neighbors, and even close personal relationships for years. The story begins not in Brooklyn but in Moscow, where Soviet intelligence planners had recognized a fundamental shift in how espionage would need to operate in the post-war world. Traditional spy networks relied on diplomatic cover or short-term operations with quick extraction plans. But the atomic age demanded something different. The secrets worth stealing were locked away in facilities that required years of patient cultivation to penetrate. The kind of intelligence the Soviet Union needed couldn't be obtained through brief encounters or rushed operations. It required agents who could live American lives while serving Soviet interests. Operatives so deeply embedded that they became indistinguishable from the communities they infiltrated. William Fisher had been selected for this role because he possessed a combination of skills that made him uniquely qualified for deep cover operations. Born in England to Russian parents, he spoke English without accent, understood Western culture intuitively, and possessed the technical expertise to manage complex communications equipment. More importantly, he had demonstrated the psychological resilience necessary for long-term isolation from his homeland. Living under deep cover meant years without contact with family, years of maintaining fictional relationships, years of pretending to be someone else while never forgetting who he really was and why he was there. The transformation of Willem Fischer into Rudolph Il had begun years before he ever set foot on American soil. Soviet intelligence had created an entire backstory complete with childhood memories, family history, and personal experiences that could withstand casual scrutiny. They had forged documents dating back decades, created employment records, established financial histories, and even manufactured personal belongings that supported his cover identity. By the time he arrived in the United States, Rudolph Abel had a past that was more thoroughly documented than many legitimate American citizens. But creating the identity was only the beginning. Living it successfully required skills that went far beyond traditional espionage training. Abel had to become a method actor, playing a role that never ended, maintaining his character not just during operational meetings but in every moment of his daily life. He had to develop genuine friendships, while never revealing his true purpose. He had to establish business relationships that appeared authentic, while serving as cover for intelligence activities. He had to become someone that neighbors would trust, that landlords would rent to, that bank managers would approve for accounts and loans. The Brooklyn apartment that served as his base of operations was itself a masterpiece of deception. To visitors, it appeared to be the modest home of an aging artist who enjoyed painting and photography. The walls displayed his watercolors of New York landmarks. His easel stood by the window where morning light illuminated his work. Photography equipment filled one corner, suggesting a serious but amateur interest in capturing city life. Books on art and culture lined the shelves. Everything appeared consistent with the life of a retired man pursuing creative interests in his golden years. But hidden within this carefully constructed domestic scene was one of the most sophisticated intelligence communications centers ever established on American soil. Behind false walls and inside hollowed-out objects, Abel maintained radio equipment capable of transmitting coded messages across continents. Invisible ink, microscopic photography equipment, and encryption materials were concealed throughout the apartment with such skill that casual searches would reveal nothing suspicious. The same hands that painted peaceful watercolors also developed photographs of classified documents and encoded intelligence that would find its way to Moscow within days of acquisition. The network Abel managed extended far beyond his Brooklyn apartment. Through carefully cultivated relationships and years of patient recruitment, he had established connections that reached into defense contractors, military installations, and research facilities across the northeastern United States. His sub-agents, many of whom never knew they were working for Soviet intelligence, provided a steady stream of technical documents, personnel information, and strategic intelligence that Moscow considered among their most valuable Cold War assets. The genius of Abel's operation lay not in dramatic spy thriller techniques, but in its remarkable ordinariness. He had become so thoroughly American that his neighbors considered him a trusted friend. He had established himself so convincingly as a legitimate resident that his presence in sensitive areas attracted no suspicion. When he traveled to photograph military installations, he appeared to be nothing more than an artist documenting American industrial might. When he met with sources, the encounters looked like casual social visits between friends. This perfect facade had protected him for years, but it contained within it the seeds of his eventual downfall. The first crack appeared not in Brooklyn but in Paris, where a Soviet intelligence officer named Rio Hehanen was drinking himself into oblivion at a left-bank cafe. I had been Abel's principal lieutenant for 3 years, handling courier duties and managing sub-networks across the American Northeast. But by early 1957 the pressures of deep cover life had pushed him toward a psychological breaking point that would ultimately expose the entire operation. Hannon's deterioration began with alcohol, progressed to mistit meetings, and culminated in increasingly erratic behavior that violated every principle of operational security Abel had drilled into his network. Where Abel maintained iron discipline and perfect cover, Hannon had begun making mistakes that drew attention from local authorities. He had been recalled to Moscow for what Soviet intelligence euphemistically called consultation. But Hannon understood the reality behind that summons. Officers who returned to Moscow under such circumstances rarely returned to operational duties. On May 6, 1957, instead of boarding his flight to Moscow, Rio Hannon walked into the American embassy in Paris and asked to speak with someone from the Central Intelligence Agency. The words he spoke to the duty officer that morning would trigger the largest counterintelligence investigation in Cold War history. He told them about Rudolph Abel, about the Brooklyn apartment, about the networks of sub-agents gathering classified information across the United States. Most importantly, he provided details about operational procedures, communication methods and security. Protocols that would allow American intelligence to penetrate Abel's carefully constructed world. The information he provided was so detailed, so comprehensive that CIA analysts initially suspected it might be disinformation designed to mislead American counterintelligence efforts. The scope of the operation he described seemed too vast, too sophisticated for one man to manage from a modest Brooklyn apartment. But as analysts cross-referenced his intelligence with surveillance reports, financial records, and communication intercepts that had puzzled them for years, patterns emerged that confirmed Hannon's credibility. The CIA immediately contacted the FBI, initiating a level of cooperation between the agencies that was unprecedented in domestic counter-intelligence operations. While the CIA had extensive experience with foreign intelligence operations, Abel represented something different. He was a foreign operative conducting espionage activities on American soil, placing him squarely within FBI jurisdiction. But the sophistication of his operation, the international connections, and the technical complexity of his communication systems required CIA expertise that the FBI couldn't replicate. Agent Ed Gamber was selected to lead the FBI team because of his extensive experience with Soviet intelligence operations and his reputation for meticulous investigative work. Gamber understood that arresting Abel would be the easy part. The real challenge lay in documenting his activities thoroughly enough to support prosecution while gathering intelligence about his networks before they could be dismantled or extracted. The surveillance operation that began in May 1957 revealed the true scope of Abel's achievement. FBI agents watching his apartment documented a routine so perfectly ordinary that it provided ideal cover for extraordinary activities. Abel woke each morning at precisely 7:30, prepared breakfast with the methodical care of a man living alone, and spent his mornings painting watercolors by his window. To observers, he appeared to be exactly what his cover identity claimed, a retired photographer, an artist living quietly in Brooklyn. But the surveillance also revealed subtle anomalies that took on new significance in light of Hannon's intelligence. Abel's walks through the neighborhood followed routes that passed dead-drop locations Hannon had identified. His visits to photography supply stores corresponded with times when he needed to replenish materials for document reproduction. His seemingly casual conversations with neighbors and shopkeepers followed patterns consistent with intelligence gathering rather than genuine social interaction. The technical surveillance presented unique challenges. Abel's apartment was equipped with sophisticated radio equipment capable of transmitting coded messages to Moscow, but the transmissions themselves were protected by encryption systems that American coders couldn't penetrate in real time. FBI technicians needed to gather enough evidence to prove the equipment's purpose without alerting Abel to their surveillance. They needed to document his activities without revealing their knowledge of his true identity. The investigation expanded to include surveillance of Abel's known associates, analysis of his financial transactions, and reconstruction of his movements over the previous decade. His threat of investigation revealed additional complexity in an operation that had been far more successful than American intelligence had realized. Abel hadn't just been stealing documents and transmitting intelligence. He had been orchestrating a comprehensive penetration of American defense capabilities that reached into atomic research, military development, and strategic planning. The evidence gathered during those final weeks of surveillance painted a picture of operational success that stunned American intelligence analysts. Abel had maintained secure communications with Moscow for nearly 10 years without detection. He had recruited and managed sub-agents who provided classified information from multiple sources. He had established legitimate business relationships that provided cover for travel and financial transactions. Most remarkably, he had done all of this while living openly in Brooklyn, maintaining friendships with neighbors who considered him a trusted member of their community. But Abel's greatest strength was also his greatest vulnerability. The deep cover identity that protected him from casual scrutiny also trapped him within a life he couldn't easily abandon. Unlike diplomatic operatives, who could claim immunity or flee to embassy protection, Abel was completely dependent on maintaining his cover until Soviet intelligence could arrange extraction. He couldn't simply disappear without abandoning years of carefully constructed relationships and operational investments. The FBI team recognized this vulnerability and designed their approach accordingly. Rather than Conducting a dramatic raid that might destroy evidence or allow Abel to claim diplomatic status, they planned a careful operation that would isolate him from potential escape routes while preserving the intelligence value of his apartment and equipment. The arrest would need to appear routine enough to avoid alerting other Soviet operatives while being thorough enough to prevent Abel from destroying evidence or activating emergency protocols. Agent Gamber spent the final days before the arrest studying every detail of Abel's routine, identifying the optimal moment when he would be most vulnerable and least likely to have time for defensive measures. The Hotel Lom presented the perfect opportunity. Abel had been staying there periodically, apparently as part of operational security measures designed to vary his patterns and avoid surveillance. But the hotel's layout actually made surveillance easier, providing FBI teams with multiple observation points and controlled access routes. The morning of June 21st found Abel following his established routine with a precision that had kept him safe for nearly a decade. He woke at his usual time, prepared his materials and began painting watercolors of the Brooklyn Bridge. The same methodical approach that had made him such an effective spy was now working against him, making his actions predictable to the FBI team's position throughout the hotel. As Agent Gamber listened at the door of room 839, he could hear the soft sounds of Abel arranging his art supplies completely unaware that his carefully constructed world was about to collapse. The man inside that room had successfully deceived American intelligence for years. But his remarkable career was about to end with a knock on the door that would echo through Cold War history. The sound that Agent Gamber heard through the door was deliberate, methodical. The soft scraping of a paint being mixed on a palette, the gentle tap of brush against water glass, the rustle of paper being adjusted on an easel. These were the sounds of a man completely absorbed in his work, utterly convinced of his safety. Abel had no reason to suspect that this morning would be different from hundreds of others. His operational security had been flawless for nearly a decade. His cover identity was so thoroughly established that even experienced intelligence officers found it difficult to believe he was anything other than what he appeared to be. But Abel's confidence was built on assumptions that were no longer valid. He assumed that Rio Hannon was either dead or safely contained in Moscow. He assumed that his communication methods remained uncompromised. He assumed that his carefully constructed identity could withstand any level of scrutiny American authorities might direct toward him. Every assumption was wrong, but Abel had no way of knowing that the foundation of his security had crumbled weeks earlier. In a Paris cafe, at exactly 8:47 in the morning, Agent Gamber gave the signal. FBI teams positioned throughout the Hotel Lom moved simultaneously, sealing stairwells and securing elevators while maintaining the appearance of normal hotel activity. The operation had been rehearsed extensively with each agent assigned specific responsibilities designed to prevent Abel from destroying evidence or activating emergency communication protocols. The teams understood that they had one opportunity to capture intact the intelligence treasure contained within Abel's operational materials. The knock on the door of room 839 was polite, professional, designed to suggest routine hotel business rather than law enforcement action. Abel's response came after a brief pause, his voice carrying the slight accent that neighbors had attributed to his European background. He was asking who was there, using the cautious tone of a man who had learned to be careful about unexpected visitors. Agent Gamber identified himself as hotel security, investigating reports of a water leak in the room below. The door opened to reveal a man who looked exactly like the photographs FBI surveillance teams had been taking for weeks. Abel stood approximately 5 feet 8 inches in tall with thinning gray hair and the pale complexion of someone who spent most of his time indoors. He wore a simple white shirt and dark trousers, paint-stained fingers holding a brush he had been using moments earlier. His eyes showed mild annoyance at the interruption, rather than fear or suspicion. To all appearances, he was nothing more than an aging artist, irritated at having his morning routine disturbed. But Agent Gamber was looking for subtle signs that would confirm Abel's true identity. The way he positioned himself in the doorway, maintaining visual contact while keeping his hands free, the quick glance he made toward the interior of the room, checking for anything that might appear suspicious to visitors, the measured quality of his speech, careful pronunciation that suggested someone thinking in one language while speaking another. These were the behavioral patterns of a trained intelligence operative, invisible to casual observers but unmistakable to someone who knew what to look for. The moment of recognition was mutual. Agent Gamber saw understanding dawn in Abel's eyes as additional FBI agents appeared in the hallway, their presence making clear that this was not a routine hotel maintenance call. Abel's expression shifted from annoyance to resignation. With remarkable speed, suggesting a man who had always known this day might come and had prepared himself psychologically for capture. There was no panic, no attempt to flee, no dramatic gestures. Abel simply stepped back from the door and allowed the agents to enter his room. What they found inside room 839 would provide American intelligence with insights into Soviet espionage, capabilities that exceeded their most optimistic expectations. The watercolor paintings were genuinely accomplished works of art, demonstrating that Abel had developed real skill in his cover profession. But hidden throughout the room were materials that revealed the true scope of his activities. Invisible ink supplies concealed inside art materials. Encryption equipment disguised as radio components. Photographs of classified documents stored within hollowed-out books. Communication codes written in a cipher that would take American cryptographers weeks to break. The most significant discovery was Abel's shortwave radio, a sophisticated piece of equipment capable of transmitting coded messages directly to Moscow. The radio had been modified with components that allowed it to operate on frequencies reserved for intelligence communications using power levels and transmission patterns designed to avoid detection by American monitoring stations. Technical analysis would later reveal that Abel had been in regular contact with Soviet intelligence throughout his years in Brooklyn, receiving instructions and transmitting intelligence with a reliability that demonstrated remarkable operational discipline. Agent Gamber conducted the arrest with professional courtesy that reflected both respect for Abel's skills and awareness that this capture represented a significant intelligence opportunity. Abel was informed of his rights under American law, a procedure that seemed to amuse him slightly. He made no attempt to claim diplomatic immunity, offered no protests about his treatment, and showed no surprise at the thoroughness with which FBI agents began cataloging the contents of his room. His behavior suggested a man who had always understood that capture was a professional hazard and had accepted that risk as part of his service to the Soviet Union. The initial interrogation began immediately, conducted by agents trained in techniques designed to elicit information from professional intelligence operatives. Abel responded to questions with careful precision, providing basic biographical information while revealing nothing about his activities or associates. He confirmed his identity as Rudolf Ivanovich Abul, claimed to be a photographer and artist, and maintained that he had no knowledge of any espionage activities. His responses were so carefully neutral that they provided no useful intelligence while avoiding statements that could be proven false. But Abel's behavior during questioning revealed as much as his words. He showed familiarity with interrogation procedures that suggested extensive training in resistance techniques. He demonstrated knowledge of American legal processes that went beyond what a legitimate immigrant would possess. Most significantly, he displayed a level of calm that was inconsistent with an innocent man facing serious criminal charges. Everything about his demeanor confirmed that FBI agents were dealing with a highly trained professional intelligence operative. The search of Abel's Brooklyn apartment began while he was being processed at FBI headquarters, revealing the full extent of his operational capabilities. Federal agents working with technical specialists from the CIA found equipment and materials that transformed their understanding of Soviet intelligence activities in the United States. The apartment contained enough supplies to support multiple intelligence networks, suggesting that Abel had been managing operations far more extensive than even Hihan's defection had indicated. Hidden compartments throughout the apartment contained thousands of dollars in cash, multiple sets of identity documents, and communication equipment that represented the most advanced technology Soviet intelligence could provide. Photography equipment capable of reproducing documents with microscopic precision. Chemical supplies for developing invisible ink and processing secret communications. Maps of the northeastern United States, marked with locations that corresponded to military installations and defense contractors. The apartment was not just Abel's residence. It was a fully equipped intelligence operations center disguised as an artist's studio. The financial records discovered in the apartment provided the clearest evidence of Abel's true activities. Bank statements showed regular deposits that had no apparent legitimate source. Currency from multiple countries suggested international connections that contradicted his cover story. Most significantly, investigators found evidence of financial support provided to individuals whose names appeared on lists of personnel with access to classified information. The paper trail documented a systematic effort to cultivate sources within American defense establishments. As word of Abel's capture spread through American intelligence agencies, analysts began reassessing years of unexplained security breaches and leaked information, technical documents that had appeared in Soviet publications without apparent source, personnel movements that had seemed coincidental, but might have been guided by intelligence, defense contractor employees whose financial situations had improved unexpectedly. The capture of Abel provided a lens through which seemingly unrelated incidents began forming patterns that revealed the scope of Soviet penetration into American military and atomic programs. The political implications of Abel's capture extended far beyond intelligence concerns. His arrest occurred during a period when Cold War tensions were escalating rapidly, with both superpowers engaged in an arms race that demanded absolute security for their most sensitive programs. The revelation that Soviet intelligence had successfully operated sophisticated networks within the United States for nearly a decade represented a significant intelligence failure that would require congressional investigation and major reforms in American counterintelligence procedures. President Eisenhower was briefed on Abel's capture within hours of his arrest, receiving a preliminary assessment that described the case as potentially the most significant espionage breakthrough since the beginning of the Cold War. The president's national security team recognized that Abel's network had likely provided the Soviet Union with intelligence that affected strategic planning and weapons development. The full extent of the damage would require months of investigation to assess, but initial analysis suggested that Soviet intelligence had achieved penetration of American defense capabilities that exceeded all previous estimates. International reaction to Abel's capture reflected the global implications of his activities. Allied intelligence services began reviewing their own security procedures, recognizing that if Soviet intelligence could achieve such success in the United States, their own operations might be similarly compromised. The arrest sent shock waves through intelligence communities worldwide, forcing a reassessment of deep cover operations and the vulnerabilities they created in even the most security-conscious nations. For Abel himself, the capture marked the end of one phase of his service to the Soviet Union, but not necessarily the end of his story. Professional intelligence operatives understood that capture was a risk of their profession, but they also understood that governments sometimes found ways to recover valuable assets through prisoner exchanges and diplomatic negotiations. Abel's value to Soviet intelligence was so significant that Moscow would almost certainly attempt to secure his release through whatever means proved feasible. The legal proceedings that would follow Abel's arrest promised to be unlike any previous espionage case in American history. The evidence gathered from his apartment and the intelligence provided by Hannon's defection would support charges that could result in the death penalty under American espionage statutes. But the case would also provide American prosecutors with an unprecedented opportunity to expose Soviet intelligence methods and capabilities in a public forum that would serve both legal and propaganda purposes. As Agent Gamber completed the arrest procedures and prepared Abel for transfer to federal detention facilities, he understood that this capture represented more than the end of one spy's career. It marked a turning point in Cold War intelligence operations, demonstrating that even the most sophisticated espionage networks could be penetrated and destroyed through patient investigation and international cooperation. The man being led away in handcuffs had achieved remarkable success during his years of operation, but his capture would provide American intelligence with insights that would reshape counterintelligence operations for decades to come. The capture of Rudolf Eel represented more than just the end of one extraordinary espionage career. It marked the moment when American intelligence agencies finally understood the true sophistication of Soviet deep cover operations and the vulnerabilities they exposed in Western society. Abel had lived among Americans for nearly a decade, stealing their secrets while earning their trust, demonstrating that the Cold War was being fought not just in distant capitals, but in Brooklyn apartments and neighborhood art studios. His arrest would lead to a 30-year prison sentence. But the story didn't end there. In 1962, Abel was exchanged for captured U-2 pilot Francis Gary Powers on Berlin's Glenica Bridge in one of the most famous prisoner swaps in Cold War history. The Bridge would later be immortalized as the Bridge of Spies. But for Abel, it represented a return to the homeland he had served with such remarkable dedication. The hunt for Rudolph Ale proved that even the most carefully constructed identities could be penetrated through patient investigation and international cooperation. It revealed that the greatest spies weren't the dramatic figures of popular imagination but ordinary-looking people who disappeared so completely into their cover lives that they became invisible. Abel's watercolors of the Brooklyn Bridge still exist today, painted by hands that had also photographed America's most classified secrets. They serve as a reminder that in the shadow war of espionage, the most dangerous enemies often hide in plain sight, living lives so convincingly normal that they fool everyone around them until the moment someone finally knocks on their door.